Have you ever owned an internet connection? Have you ever subscribed to an internet service provider? If you have, you might be interested in this next story. The Federal Trade Commission is suing, along with Arizona, California, Indiana, Michigan, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, Frontier Communications, the internet service provider, asking for a preliminary and permanent injunction and monetary and other relief over advertised internet speeds not being actual internet speeds. Bandwidth we're talking about. So if you buy a 50 megabits per second connection, what can you really expect to get? Sure, you buy a 50 megabit per second connection, but by the time the internet gets to your house, sure, it's 48 or it's 46, maybe it's 45. But should you be buying a 50 megabit internet connection and getting 15? That's a different question. And there's things along the way that could affect this. Your customer premises equipment, your router, your choice of Wi-Fi, your distance between your computer and all that, that's going to affect it. So we're not really too concerned if the Wi-Fi that you're accessing from the other room through a solid wall, inside a Faraday cage, if that's not as fast, okay, like that's just a complaint that Wi-Fi doesn't work as well as it should, as well as you'd like it to. But if the actual connection provided by the ISP is not fast there, if you connect up equipment that can handle that speed and is directly connected by wire, it should be mostly the connection that you're paying for, the bandwidth that you're paying for. So I thought we would go through this. It's rather long, but I think we can dumb it down. I think we can abridge it down to something more manageable. So it's the Federal Trade Commission, which has authority under the FTC Act, and the state attorney generals of Arizona, India, Michigan, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and California, bringing an action against Frontier. And let's see if we can get to the actual claims here. Of course, they claim that Frontier has maintained substantial course of trade affecting commerce, which is probably how the FTC has jurisdiction over them. A lot of times, well, all the time, the jurisdiction of a federal agency or federal law has to be established by an enumerated power in the Constitution, in the U.S. Constitution. Otherwise, the powers not given to the federal government fall to the states and to the people according to the 10th Amendment, I think it is. That's how you get jurisdiction. The FTC, the FCC, the Americans with Disabilities Act, these need to have some basis in federal jurisdiction. Otherwise, the law does not apply to either a specific situation or apply at all. So they go into what Frontier does. They are an internet service provider that, among other things, provides DSL, also fiber optic. They provide residential DSL to 1.3 million consumers in 25 states. And they talk about how hundreds of thousands of consumers have discontinued their subscriptions. They provide residential DSL internet service to tens or hundreds of thousands of consumers in the states that are listed. And they provide DSL to rural areas as well. Their marketing makes internet speed a prominent selling point for their residential DSL service. The FTC alleges that consumers consider internet speed to be one of the most important decision-making factors when they compare competing internet service providers. Frontier offers residential DSL internet service in tiers corresponding to speeds measured in megabits per second, 6 megabits, 12 megabits, 18 megabits, 24 megabits, and 45 megabits in certain markets. Oh, they also offer 1 or 3 megabits in certain markets. That would be okay. We don't necessarily like that that you would have a 1 megabit internet connection, but hey, if that's what you could get, that's fine. As long as you know what you're paying for, I don't think there's any huge legal complaint. Excuse me. Frontier advertises in various ways. They start going over this. Here's what their advertisements look like. $30 for 18 megabit internet plus 1 year of Amazon Prime. $12 for 12 megabits internet, sent consumers advertisements, directed sales representatives to offer, etc., etc., etc. Frontier then connects that consumer's home to their network and does not provide any written documentation regarding their service, either at the point of sale or when the service commences remotely or through its technicians. Frontier's bills are the first written correspondence consumers receive. Frontier has in numerous instances advertised or sold DSL internet service at tiers corresponding to speeds that Frontier did not and often could not provide to consumers. Network limits imposed by Frontier prevent numerous consumers from receiving DSL internet service at speeds corresponding to the tiers of service they pay for. Now, I don't know what level of service provider Frontier is, but they are probably buying their internet access from one of the top tier providers. In the way the internet works, you have these top tier providers who don't sell consumer internet connections, and they exchange internet bandwidth freely between these top tier providers, like Level 3. There was recently a Level 3 outage in Pennsylvania, so that's why it's on my mind. And then they sell sort of a wholesale internet bandwidth to second level providers, which would be Comcast or probably Frontier. Frontier might also be a third level provider who then buys it from a second level provider at still some kind of a wholesale price. But it really depends on whether they're going through a second level provider to get to the internet, what we know as the internet. But if whatever they're doing, they're probably not a top tier provider. So Frontier has a financial incentive to limit the amount of bandwidth they provide to their customers, to limit it to something that allows them to make a profit. If you're paying for a 50 megabit internet connection, but you're only getting 25 megabits, then Frontier can make a higher profit off of your connection because they'll never have to pay for the 50 megabits that from their wholesale provider, from their upstream provider. So there's a financial incentive to do this. If you sold, a terabit per second of internet to all of your customers, but then you only needed to pay for a 500 gigabit connection to service all those customers at these reduced speeds, you've saved yourself a bucket of money. And either you can pad your own pockets with that, or maybe that's just the thing Frontier thinks it has to do in order to survive in the market or something. Network limits imposed by Frontier prevent numerous consumers from receiving DSL internet at speeds. So that means this accusation is that they are intentionally imposing limits, not just experiencing some sort of technological limitation while otherwise trying to keep the pipe open as wide as possible. They are actually imposing a limit. For instance, Frontier imposes one such network limit when Frontier internally provisions or limits the DSL speeds it provides to each home connected to its network. A home cannot receive DSL service in excess of the speed Frontier provisions to it. Frontier purports to set its provision speeds in part to enforce the distinctions between speed tiers. Sure, if you had an unlimited speed on your DSL, then it would run at the limits the technology imposes, whatever the phone lines are capable of handling the DSL connection, that would be your maximum speed. But Frontier is going to sell you 50 megabit per second internet, and they should be imposing a provisioned limit of 50 megabits per second. So even if your connection is physically capable of more than 50 megabits per second, it would be limited by Frontier's software or hardware provisioning. But I think what the FTC is going to say is that that limit was set lower. We'll see. For example, because a DSL signal becomes weaker the further it gets from the source of transmission, the speed that Frontier is capable of providing to consumers whose homes are distant is slower. The type of networking equipment Frontier uses to provide service to a particular customer, including the DSL access multiplexer, also limits the speed Frontier can provide to that consumer. So those are the hardware limits. But they didn't sell them hardware limits. They sold them a 50 megabit connection and didn't say anything about hardware limits. Frontier provides DSL internet speed at the time it connects the consumer's home for service. Frontier does not inform its subscribers of their provisioned speeds or provide subscribers with a mean to learn their provisioned speeds. In numerous instances, Frontier has provisioned consumers for slower speeds than the tiers of DSL internet service to which they are subscribed, preventing those consumers from receiving service at speeds corresponding to the tier of service they pay for. Provisioning sets an upper limit on speed, but not a lower bound. Even when Frontier provisions a consumer for a particular speed, this does not guarantee the consumer will receive service at that speed. So they might provision it for a slower speed, and you might receive an even slower speed. In numerous instances, Frontier has provisioned consumers DSL internet service at speeds consistently lower than even the provisioned limits set for those consumers, preventing these consumers from ever, or for more than microscopic or de minimis, meaning legally insufficient durations, legally insignificant durations, from receiving the maximum speeds Frontier represents these consumers can achieve for the speed tiers they subscribe. This has occurred due to factors known to Frontier and within Frontier's control, including physical factors such as long distances, technical factors such as low bandwidth, obsolete, or overloaded DSL provisioning equipment. Frontier's misrepresentations. What does misrepresentation? What does the word misrepresentation bring to mind? Fraud. That brings to mind fraud. When you lie to somebody to get something that you are not entitled to, that is fraud. Frontier's misrepresentations regarding the DSL internet speed tiers to which numerous consumers are subscribed are not limited to those made at or near the point of sale, but continue on an ongoing basis, for example, in their monthly billing statements. In numerous instances, the DSL speed tiers Frontier tells customers they are subscribed to, and the speeds Frontier actually provides these consumers, substantially differ. These substantial differences negatively impact download speeds as quantified in megabits per second, consumers' qualitative experience of the internet performance and usage, or both. Indeed, in numerous instances, the speeds provisioned and provided to consumers correspond with slower and often less expensive tiers of DSL service offered by Frontier. Again, it wouldn't be a problem if they said, we can only provide you with a 14 megabit per second connection, and the price for that is $100 a month. That would not be fraud. That would not be a misrepresentation. And that would give the consumer the ability to judge whether they want to pay for Frontier service or not. And so Frontier is also gaining a competitive advantage wherever there are competitors, because a person who wants to get an internet connection, let's say that the physical limitation of their location and network equipment to their home is 50 megabits per second, but Frontier sells them a 100 megabits per second connection, provisions them or otherwise limits their speed to 50 megabits. Well, someone who had a choice, if everybody else is advertising the appropriate 50 megabit connection because that's all that house can get, and Frontier is advertising 100 megabits, that's fraud. That's anti-competitive practices. That's probably a violation of state anti-competition, anti-competitive practice laws as well. We'll see what the FTC gets to in a second. In early 2019, a management consulting firm analyzed, at Frontier's direction and with Frontier's participation, Frontier's proprietary network data and internal records for nearly 1.5 million then current DSL subscribers. The analysis found that 440,000 of them, nearly 30%, were potentially oversold on speed tiers that exceeded the actual speeds Frontier provided to them. In numerous instances, Frontier has billed, charged, collected, or attempted to collect payment from consumers for more expensive and higher speed tiers of DSL internet service than Frontier provisions for, provides, has provided, or has been capable of providing to such consumers. Thousands of consumers since January 1st, 2015, around the country, including members of these states, have complained to Frontier. Numerous complaints have described service that failed to support typical usage and activities that consumers should have been able to perform adequately at the speed tiers to which they were subscribed. Numerous consumers have conducted speed tests using third-party online tools and confirmed that they were experiencing speeds far below their tier. These tests did not reveal, however, that these lower speeds may have been due to factors within Frontier's control. So they're claiming that this violates the FTC Act, which prohibits unfair or deceptive acts or practices in or affecting commerce. So this is the Federal Trade Commission, not the Federal Communications Commission, but the Federal Trade Commission is claiming that they have jurisdiction over the selling of goods and services, that their law prohibits unfair or deceptive acts or practices. And so if you sell a service, whether it's internet service or whatever service, if you sell a service and you advertise it or provide it unfairly or with deceptive acts or practices, then you would fall under this law. Misrepresentations or deceptive omissions of material or relevant facts constitute deceptive acts or practices. Acts or practices are unfair if they cause or are likely to cause substantial injury to consumers that consumers cannot reasonably avoid and that is not outweighed by countervailing benefits to consumers or competition. So count 1 is a misrepresentation of DSL internet speeds. Count 2 then is unfair billing practices because they overbilled. And then they go into the state law. Violation of Arizona Consumer Fraud Act. So it's fraud here. California says it is a violation of the California Business and Professions Code. We've seen this before. This is also California's unfair competition law. It's a violation of the Indiana Deceptive Consumer Sales Act, allegedly. Allegedly! It's a violation of the Michigan Consumer Protection Act, a violation of North Carolina's law against misrepresenting DSL internet speeds. It's an unfair billing practice in North Carolina. It's a violation of Wisconsin's Deceptive Trade Practices Act and misrepresentation of DSL internet speeds and misrepresentation of landline phone performance in Wisconsin, and a violation of Wisconsin's telecommunications service law as a misrepresentation and the Wisconsin unfair billing law as well, and Wisconsin's unfair trade practices law. So that's a lot of violations in Wisconsin alone. The subscription terms for DSL service were misrepresented, allegedly. The subscription terms for landline phone service were misrepresented, as well as improper billing practices again there. They allege that consumers are suffering, have suffered, and will continue to suffer these injuries as a result of Frontier's violations, and they ask for injunctive relief. Now, injunctive relief requires irreparable injury, that you can't just give people money to remedy the problem. And I can see both sides of that. Sure, you could just refund their money, right? But they also have suffered an inability to access the internet at the speeds and with the quality of service that they paid for. Is that some sort of irreparable injury? I don't know. That's going to be one of Frontier's defenses, is that this is not an irreparable injury and shouldn't receive injunctive relief as a remedy, an order from the court telling them to restore the internet to the paid-for speeds. They go over how the court has the power to grant the relief based on Section 13B of the FTC Act, empowering the court to grant injunctive relief, and then goes through all the state laws there, which we're going to skip over, and then asks for an injunction preventing future violations, granting relief, which I'm assuming is money damages, and then they ask for the all-encompassing, all other additional relief that the court determines to be just and proper. And then they go through the relief requested by all of the states, which is probably similar. I don't think they ask for a specific amount of monetary damages. And then you have all the signature pages of all the different state attorneys general. And that is then the Federal Trade Commission and 6 states versus Frontier Communications. So, yay! I think people complain about not getting their advertised internet speeds a lot. I certainly complain about not getting my internet speeds a lot. I would really prefer if when they advertise, the new house has 500 megabit. It actually has gigabit, but I'm paying for 500 megabit. And I'm looking forward to making sure that I actually get that. My current internet connection is a VDSL connection, and I feel like we're not really getting what we paid for, but I'm also not getting so little that I felt like complaining about it. Plus, we're going to be out of here in a little bit, so it's not my problem anymore then. But yeah, let me know what you think of that. Do you think Frontier is going to get what they deserve? Reminder, this is all just allegedly at this point. This is a complaint, not a court's opinion finding facts. And we can't say for sure that Frontier doesn't have a defense. It just looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, smells like a duck, walks like a duck. It's probably true in my opinion, but I can't say without a shadow of a doubt or reasonable doubt, which doesn't really apply here. I would be convinced by this complaint alone. But I would, if I was a judge, of course, I'm going to let the parties make their arguments and motions and present their evidence and all that. But on its face, at this initial stage of a complaint, I'm already smelling something here and hoping that Frontier gets whatever they deserve and that the customers get whatever they deserve from Frontier. I don't think it should be legal. I don't think it's proper for any service provider, internet service provider, to advertise higher speeds than they can actually provide. If Frontier comes back and says, we do provide the advertised speeds, it's the customer's premises, customer's equipment that make it impossible. We're not responsible for the connection from our DSL modem into your house. If you get a cheap router and you have bad Wi-Fi and you have the material in your walls and things makes it hard for Wi-Fi to achieve maximum speeds, or, you know, if you're trying to get maximum speeds over Wi-Fi from 300 feet away, yeah, I understand that's probably a valid complaint. But if you've got somebody who's plugged their computer directly into the DSL modem and done a speed test and they get half the speed that they're advertised consistently, not just accidentally for a minute or two, but the opposite, where they almost never get the advertised speed, that seems like some kind of misrepresentation, violation, etc. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And that's our show. Thanks for joining me. I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, and this is Lawful Masses, your favorite legal news and education program here on YouTube, also on Floatplane and on twitch.tv/lawfulmasses, live on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. This is a community-supported channel, which means I need your money. It takes time and effort to make these videos, and in order to make room in my life, I need to also have support. So I really appreciate your support on patreon.com/ljfrench or sponsors.com/law. You can support the channel through YouTube memberships, or you can support the channel through Floatplane subscriptions. Thank you very much in the month of May to the following $50 plus supporters: Joe Tyson, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Spirit Bear, Benjamin Hitov, Ugly Grill, Rudolph Bescherer Jr., Brandyn, Abel, Torpedan, RDHDragon, Earthbound Star, and ShadowTycho. And thank you to the $5 plus supporters who are scrolling on the screen in front of me. You're all on the LED tablet behind me. I love you all. Thank you for joining me. I'm Leonard French. I'll see you in the videos that drop and the comments below.